The moment Amelia looked up and saw my face on the magazine cover her new date was holding, her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. I watched from the mezzanine of the restaurant, expressionless, while Joseph, the man she was clearly trying to impress, laughed without realizing she was frozen for a very different reason. "You okay?" he asked her, tapping the magazine. "Can you believe this guy? 30 under 30, self-made billionaire, vanished for 5 years and now he's everywhere. Crazy, right?" Her lips parted. No words came out, because that guy was me, and 6 months ago she told me I would never make it. 6 months ago I was standing in the rain outside her apartment with a half-written business proposal in one hand and a promise in the other. A promise she didn't even let me speak before slamming the door in my face. "You're wasting your time, Matthew," she had said. "This isn't a movie. You don't become someone just because you believe hard enough." She had already chosen Joseph back then, the man with the polished shoes, the inherited wealth, the elevator to success. She didn't want to wait for someone who still took the stairs. But I climbed anyway. And now? The air up here is a little thinner. Joseph laughed again and flipped the page. My face, again. This time on stage. He still hadn't noticed the color draining from her face. I stayed upstairs, just watching, not to make her feel small, but to remind myself that I wasn't. She once told me I didn't have the kind of face that could be on a magazine. Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. Funny how fast admiration looks like regret, when you realize what you let go, and how quiet pride becomes when you're the one sitting across from it, holding a lie in your lap. Amelia adjusted her dress, blinked quickly, and finally spoke. I used to know him." Joseph leaned back, amused. "Seriously? Small world." She glanced up, and for the first time since that night in the rain, our eyes met. I didn't smile. I just walked away. Because the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving you never needed their belief to begin with. 6 years ago, I met Amelia at a tech networking event I wasn't even supposed to attend. I had borrowed a shirt too tight for my shoulders and printed business cards on cheap paper at a 24-hour store. She wore confidence like perfume, intoxicating, expensive, and meant to linger. I was pitching my app to a group that ignored me completely when she walked over with a glass of white wine and said, "You talk like you believe in this." I told her I did. She smiled and tilted her head. "Then maybe I'll believe too." We ended up outside that night, sitting on a curb, sharing fries from a paper bag like we weren't surrounded by luxury cars and shallow people pretending to be deeper than they were. That's how it started. She became the reason I checked my phone at midnight, the reason I stopped skipping meals, the reason I believed my late nights would eventually turn into something. She told me I had potential, not talent, not brilliance, potential. Like, I was a lottery ticket she was willing to scratch as long as the odds looked decent. Back then, I didn't mind. When we moved in together, I still couldn't afford to split rent evenly. She paid more without saying a word, but her silence said everything. Every missed dinner, every canceled weekend, every night she spent with her friends while I stayed in debugging code. It added up, and every time I said, "just a little longer," her eyes said, "You're already too late." She never yelled. Amelia was never loud. She broke hearts quietly, with gentle disappointment and elegant exits. The last day we were together, she sat across from me at our tiny dining table, staring at a bill I'd left unopened. "Matthew," she said, "you're a good man, but dreams don't pay for real life." I didn't say anything, because deep down, I thought she was right. That night, she left the keys on the counter and walked out without packing. She didn't even take her favorite scarf. 3 months passed, then 6, no calls. No texts. I assumed she'd moved on, maybe found someone who didn't spend 12 hours a day writing code for something no one believed in. I spent those 6 months locked away. Coding, testing, failing, starting again, sleeping under my desk, living off coffee and takeout containers, until the day I woke up to 37 missed calls from an investor, and everything changed. The app launched. The users came. The money followed. But I didn't chase the spotlight. I said no to interviews. I refused to speak at conferences. I just built, in silence, in shadow. Until one day, my face ended up on the cover of a magazine without my permission. The feature was titled "The Billionaire Who Ghosted Silicon Valley," and that magazine ended up in Joseph's hands. In Amelia's hands. The same Amelia who once told me potential wasn't enough. The same Amelia who now stared at my face like it was haunting her. But I wasn't there to haunt her. I was just watching. Watching what happened when you walk away. From someone who would have gone through hell just to hand you something real, and watching what happens when that someone no longer needs you to believe in them. The last time Amelia looked at me like that, we were in my apartment at 2 a.m. The air smelled like burnt toast and cold coffee. I had missed our anniversary dinner. Again. She sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, hair tied up the way she always did when she was tired of waiting. I apologized. She didn't speak. Just stared at the floor for a long time before finally whispering, "You're choosing a version of the future that doesn't include me." I told her she was wrong. I told her everything I was doing was for us. But she didn't believe me, because I had stopped showing her the steps, and she had stopped waiting for the destination. When she left, she said, "You love your dream more than you love me." I didn't argue, because maybe she was right. But even if she was, I had loved her in the only way I knew how, by building something meant to hold both of us. And now she was sitting across from another man, choking on regret, holding the printed face of the same person she gave up on. I hadn't planned to be here. I didn't come to this restaurant for her. Abigail had invited me, a quiet celebration with the team, a private toast for a private win. She was the one who spotted Amelia first. "Isn't that?" she started to say. I didn't answer. Because I already knew. You never forget the shape of someone who once shaped your world. I told Abigail I needed some air. I walked up to the mezzanine to clear my head, and that's when I saw Joseph holding the magazine, pointing at my face. The irony cut sharper than anything Amelia had ever said. The man she left me for was now reading about the man she left behind. She hadn't recognized my silence as growth, only as failure. And now that it had bloomed into something real, she didn't know what to do with it. When Joseph got up to take a call, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. A message flashed on my screen seconds later. "Was this your plan all along? To become someone just to humiliate me?" I read the words once, then again. The person who walked out on me without a word was now accusing me of cruelty. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned and headed back toward the table where Abigail was finishing her drink. As I approached, I felt a presence behind me. Matthew. I turned. She stood there like she was still deciding what version of herself to show me. The poised one? The regretful one? Or just the girl who used to sneak fries from my plate and fall asleep on my shoulder during late-night coding marathons? "I didn't know," she said. "That's the problem," I replied. "You never waited long enough to find out." "I made a mistake." "Only one?" She looked down. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." She stepped closer. Joseph was still on the phone, distracted. I thought Joseph was everything. "I needed," she said softly. "And what do you think now?" I think I didn't understand what love was until I saw what you became without me." I laughed under my breath. "Then you still don't understand it. Because love isn't about who someone becomes, it's about who stays when becoming anything seems impossible." She reached out. But I stepped back. Not out of anger, out of clarity. "Do you love her?" she asked, glancing toward Abigail. I didn't answer. She bit her lip, then nodded. "You do?" There was no fight in her voice anymore, no pride, just resignation, and something deeper. Realization. That what she let go was never about money. It was about someone who believed enough for both of them, even when she didn't. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I stopped her. "It's too late, Amelia." Her Eyes flickered. A tiny quake behind perfect lashes. And just like that, she understood. That second chances don't come from recognition. They come from presence, and she hadn't been present when it mattered most. That night, I couldn't sleep. Even after Abigail dropped me home and kissed me gently on the cheek, even after I told her I was fine, there was a weight pressing down on my chest that I couldn't explain. It wasn't anger. Not anymore. It was something quieter, heavier. The kind of ache that lingers even after the wound stops bleeding. I sat, alone in the living room with the lights off, staring at the skyline through the window. My reflection stared back. Calm, composed, hollow. Amelia's voice echoed in my mind. Not the one from tonight, but from years ago. Maybe love isn't about sacrifice. Maybe it's about knowing when to walk away. Back then, she said it, with pride. Like it was a quote she had rehearsed in front of a mirror. But I had clung to her words for years, trying to twist them into something that didn't sound like abandonment. Now I wondered if she ever really loved me at all, or if I was just a placeholder for the life she thought she deserved. I pressed my palms against my face, dragging them down slowly. Why was this still bothering me? Why, even after I had built the life I once dreamed of, did part of me still feel like the man sitting on that couch 6 years ago, watching her walk out the door without looking back? Maybe success doesn't overwrite the hurt. Maybe it just buries it deeper. And maybe some scars aren't on the body. They're on the memory. I thought about Abigail. How she showed up to help me move out of my first cramped apartment, even though she barely knew me then. How she never once asked what I could give her, only what I needed. She never judged my silences. She sat through them. She never asked me to become someone. She helped me become myself. But tonight, when I looked into her eyes, I saw the question she didn't ask. Do you still feel something for Amelia? And the worst part? I didn't know how to answer. Because what I felt wasn't love. It wasn't longing. It was grief. Grief for a version of me that still wanted to be chosen. Grief for the boy who once believed that if he just worked hard enough, she'd come back and say, I was wrong, you were always enough. But she didn't come back to say that. She came back to ask if she could be part of what I became. Not because she believed in me, but because the world now believed in me. And that difference mattered. It was the difference between someone who waits for your light to shine and someone who only steps into it when it's bright enough to be seen by everyone else. My phone buzzed on the table. Abigail. Still up? I stared at the screen. She knew me too well. I typed back, can't sleep. Just thinking. 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then reappeared again. Finally, she replied, About her? I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up the keys and left the apartment. Drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before I ended up outside the first apartment Amelia and I shared. The lights were off. A soft glow from a nearby lamppost cast shadows across the balcony. I remembered how she used to sit there in the evenings, legs pulled up to her chest, talking about a life with white curtains and Sunday morning pancakes. It was strange. How people can say everything you want to hear until the moment you need to hear it most, and then they go quiet. I closed my eyes. For a long time, I just stood there, not thinking, not planning, just standing in the pieces of a past I'd already walked. Away from the ache didn't go away, but it got quieter. Sometimes healing isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's just choosing not to knock on a door you once kept open too long. I turned and walked back to the car, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like chasing anything behind me. Because something better had been walking beside me all along. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping for silence. But silence, it seemed, had its own plans. As I walked toward my office, I saw a small group of employees, gathered by the reception desk, whispering. Their glances shifted between me and someone seated nearby. I didn't have to look twice. It was Amelia. She stood up the moment she saw me, holding a neatly wrapped box in both hands. "Matthew," she said softly, "I'm here to return something." I didn't respond. Not yet. She opened the box and placed it on the counter. Inside was a dark gray hoodie. Old, slightly faded. "Mine. The one you left behind when we moved out," she said. "I found it yesterday." I stared at it for a long moment before looking up. "Why bring this here?" Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to throw it away. I thought maybe it still mattered." "It doesn't." She flinched. "It did to me." Behind us, footsteps echoed. Abigail. She walked in holding 2 coffees, paused when she saw Amelia, said nothing, just walked over and handed me one, her eyes flicking between us. Amelia's gaze dropped. "That's her, isn't it?" she asked. I nodded once. "She's the one who stayed." Amelia gave a weak smile. "I figured." Before I could say anything else, the office door opened again. Joseph walked in, not with his usual swagger. This time, he looked tense. "Amelia," he said flatly, "you left your phone in my car." He handed it over but didn't let go. "You didn't tell me everything about him." "I didn't think it mattered," she said. "Well, it does now," Joseph snapped, before turning to me. "Do you know she applied for a job at my company 2 days ago?" I didn't react, just waited. "She listed you as a former reference, and when HR searched your name, they nearly choked." Amelia froze. Joseph stepped closer. "She told me you were an old boyfriend. What she didn't tell me was that you were this." He motioned at me like I was something he couldn't quite categorize. "Did you come back for him?" he asked her. "Or for what he became?" Her face went pale. I didn't need to hear her answer. I already knew it. Joseph looked at her one last time, scoffing. "Good luck trying to fix the past," he muttered, before walking away. Amelia stood there, clutching her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to the present. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about regret. And regret always arrives too late. Later that night, after the office had cleared out, I stayed behind. I told myself it was to finish paperwork, but I wasn't working. I was sitting alone in my glass-walled office, staring out into the city beyond, asking myself a question I'd already answered 100 times. Why does it still hurt? The door opened quietly behind me. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. "I waited," Amelia said, stepping inside. "I saw the lights were still on. I didn't respond." She walked to the desk, eyes scanning the surface as if searching for a version of me that still belonged to her. "I shouldn't have come today," she whispered. I wanted to see for myself if everything they said about you was true." "And?" She nodded slowly. "It is. Every word." I stood up, walked to the window, and leaned against the frame. "I used to imagine this moment," I said. "You showing up after everything, realizing what you lost." She didn't speak. But in the versions I imagined, it meant something. It felt like closure, like justice. I turned to face her. "It doesn't. It just feels empty." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't know how far you'd come." "That's the difference between us," I said. "You waited to see it." She believed in it before it happened. Her voice shook. "You loved me once." "I did," I said. "But I was loving a future you had no interest in building." She moved closer. "Can we talk? Really talk? Just one last time." I hesitated, then nodded. She sat across from me, her hands in her lap like she was holding something fragile. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," she began. "I left because I didn't think you'd ever change. You were always working, always tired. I thought I'd become invisible." "You never were," I said. "You just didn't understand the silence I needed to build something that would last." I didn't know how to wait. That's what love is sometimes. Her voice dropped. I made it about what you weren't giving me, not about what you were sacrificing. I leaned back. Amelia, you left when it was hard. Now that it's easy, you want to come back. Her eyes welled. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to take me back. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not choosing you when it mattered most. Silence followed. Then she added, when Joseph found out who you were, everything changed. He treated me like a trophy that someone else had already won. I didn't react. I told him I was with you before all this. That I knew the version of you who slept on his office floor. She wiped a tear from her cheek. But the truth is, I never really knew you. Not the real you. Not the one who kept fighting when everyone else would have folded. I walked to the bookshelf, touched a photo frame I kept hidden from public view, me and Abigail laughing, smeared with paint from a charity event she dragged me to. You know what hurts? I said without looking back. That even now, when you're here saying all the right things, part of me still hears the voice that loved you, still wonders, what if? She stood slowly. I hear it too. But the difference is, I said, turning. I don't listen to it anymore. She smiled faintly. I guess I waited too long. I nodded. You did. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. I hope she gives you everything I didn't. She already does, I replied. The door closed behind her, and with it, the last piece of the past I hadn't let go of. I sat back down. 10 minutes passed before another knock came, this one softer, familiar. Abigail peeked her head in, holding a small paper bag. I brought dinner. I smiled. How did you know I hadn't eaten? You always forget when you're thinking too hard. She stepped in, placed the bag on my desk, then looked around. She was here? I nodded. Are you okay? I met her eyes. For the first time in hours, I felt steady. Yeah, I'm okay now. She walked to me, reached for my hand. What did she want? Closure, I said. Forgiveness. Maybe a second chance. Abigail paused. And what did you give her? I squeezed her hand. Exactly what she gave me, when she walked away. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. That's the thing. About love built quietly. It doesn't demand answers. It already trusts them. I looked at Abigail and smiled. You know what I realized tonight? What? That losing Amelia wasn't a tragedy. It was the lesson I needed to recognize someone like you. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Outside the window, the city pulsed with life. But inside this moment, everything was still. The kind of stillness you don't question. You just hold it. Because sometimes peace isn't found in victory. It's found in knowing you no longer need to win. 2 weeks passed. Amelia never contacted me again. She disappeared from the office. Joseph resigned from the company that same Friday, citing conflict of interest, but I knew better. He had tried to leverage his influence to pressure my board, threatening exposure about Amelia and I, suggesting scandal. But he underestimated. One thing, I no longer had anything to hide. When the board asked me for the truth, I told them openly, calmly, that I had once dated her, that she had left, that she had returned. I wasn't afraid of the truth anymore, and men like Joseph, men who rise on manipulation, can't survive without shadows to hide behind. He left in disgrace. And Amelia? She sent her final message the following Sunday. I hope one day you'll remember me with kindness. That's all I ask. I never replied, because forgiveness isn't owed, especially not to someone who only remembers your worth when the world does too. A month later, our company was invited to sponsor a gala fundraiser, one of the biggest events in the city. I wasn't planning to attend until I saw the guest list. Abigail was the one who showed it to me. I thought you should know, she said, sliding the tablet across my desk. Amelia will be there. I looked at her. Do you want to go? She asked. Smiled faintly, only if you come with me. The night of the gala, The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, laughter, and silk-slick ambition. Cameras flashed, names buzzed in clusters. Old money shook hands with new power. Abigail stepped out of the car first, her dress flowing like liquid dusk, soft and silent. I followed, hand in hers. We didn't need to say anything. We had already won. Inside, Amelia was near the center of the room, surrounded by people she didn't seem to recognize, smiling politely, drifting from one glass of wine to the next, like a ghost of someone who used to believe she was the main character. She noticed me almost instantly. Her expression faltered. She took a step forward, then stopped when she saw Abigail. The silence between us stretched across the room like a taut wire. I didn't walk toward her. I didn't nod. I didn't wave. I turned away first. That was the real ending, and she knew it. Later that night, I was invited to the stage to speak. It wasn't planned, but the host insisted. "We need a few words from the man whose story is already legend." I stepped up. Abigail gave my hand one last squeeze before I reached the microphone. I looked at the crowd, the lights, the rows of unfamiliar eyes, but I wasn't nervous. I had already faced worse. "I want to thank everyone here," I said, my voice steady. "Not just for the support, but for the time you've taken to build something real. Because that's what matters in the end. Not status, not wealth, but who stands beside you when everything else disappears." I paused. "And who stays when no one's watching?" There was a quiet stillness in the crowd. I didn't need to name her. The ones who knew understood. I stepped off the stage and walked straight to Abigail, and just like that, the whispers stopped mattering. A few days later, my assistant brought me a box. "No sender. Just a name," she said. Inside was the scarf, the one Amelia left behind the night she walked out of our apartment. Neatly folded, still carrying the faint scent of vanilla and jasmine. I didn't even pick it up. I closed the box and placed it back on the shelf. It didn't belong to me anymore. Weeks passed. Abigail and I moved into a new place, one we designed together from the ground up. A house with windows that caught the morning light, a kitchen where she burned pancakes twice and laughed both times. Walls without ghosts. I asked her to marry me in the simplest way possible. One night, as she brushed her teeth in an oversized hoodie, I stepped into the bathroom with a ring. No music, no crowd, just us. She looked up, eyes wide with foam at the corner of her mouth, and choked on laughter before saying yes. We never posted the photos. We didn't need to. Our happiness wasn't for show. One final note came 6 months later. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. Inside, just a photo. Amelia. She was sitting at a train station bench, suitcase beside her. No makeup, wind tugging at her hair. On the back of the photo, scribbled in faint ink, "I'm leaving now. For real this time. Thank you for loving me before I knew how to love back." No name. No date. Just closure. I folded the photo once, slid it into the drawer and shut it quietly, not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to say. I had already said goodbye the moment I chose not to answer, and in that silence was the loudest freedom I had ever known.